The city smelled of smoke and lamb's blood that night. Jerusalem was swollen with Passover pilgrims, hundreds of thousands of them, pressed into every courtyard, every inn, every rooftop, their voices rising in a hum that never quite went silent even after dark. The narrow streets were slick with rain that had fallen that afternoon, and the torches along the temple walls threw orange light across the wet stones, making the whole ancient city shimmer like something caught between worlds. It was the 14th of Nisan, the night every Jewish family in the land sat down to remember the exodus from Egypt, the unleavened bread, the bitter herbs, the lamb, the great deliverance. But in an upper room somewhere in the heart of that crowded, restless city, something older than memory was about to begin. 13 men climbed the stairs. 12 of them were fishermen, tax collectors, zealots, ordinary men worn smooth by 3 years of following someone extraordinary. The 13th was Jesus of Nazareth. He had spent the day teaching in the temple courts, matching wits with Pharisees and scribes who wanted him silenced. Now he climbed those stairs quietly, his sandals worn at the heel, his robe carrying the dust of the road. He knew what was coming. He had known for some time. And yet he climbed. The question hovering over that staircase, over that whole trembling night, was not whether he would face the cross. The question was what he would leave behind before he did. The room had been prepared. Peter and John had arranged it. A long, low table, cushions on the floor, oil lamps burning warm and gold along the walls. The smell of roasted lamb filled the air, mingling with the sharp scent of bitter herbs and the sweetness of wine already poured. It was a Passover Seder, ancient and familiar, the kind of meal these men had sat through every year of their lives. They reclined at the table in the customary way, close together, the way families do, elbows nearly touching, voices comfortable with one another. And for a moment, it might have looked like any other Passover in any other room in Jerusalem. But Jesus was troubled. The Gospel of John says it plainly, that before supper, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, knowing that he had come from God and was going back to God, rose from the table. He took off his outer robe. He wrapped a towel around his waist. He poured water into a basin. And then the teacher, the one they had watched still storms and raise the dead, knelt down on the stone floor and began to wash his disciples' feet. The room went very quiet. Feet were dirty things, literally and symbolically. Washing them was the work of the lowest servant in the household. And here was Jesus, their rabbi, moving from man to man, lifting calloused fishermen's feet, pressing a towel against wet skin. Some of the disciples said nothing. They sat in stunned silence, watching him move. But when he came to Simon Peter, Peter pulled his feet back. He couldn't stand it. "Lord," he said, "are you going to wash my feet?" And Jesus looked up at him and said, "You don't understand what I'm doing now, but you will understand later." Peter shook his head. "You shall never wash my feet." And Jesus answered, quietly, steadily, "If I don't wash you, you have no part with me." Peter, being Peter, swung immediately to the other extreme. "Then not just my feet, but my hands and my head too." And there was something so humanly desperate in that moment, so achingly recognizable, that it almost makes you love him for it. When Jesus had finished and returned to his place at the table, he told them what it meant. "Do you understand what I have done to you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, for so I am. If I then, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet." He wasn't just performing a ritual. He was showing them a new kind of greatness, one that kneels. Then the evening turned darker. Jesus became visibly troubled again. The joy of the moment clouded over. He looked around the table at these men he loved and said something that must have felt like a stone dropped into still water. "Truly, truly I say to you, one of you will betray me." The silence that followed was not the quiet of a peaceful room. It was the silence of shock, of 12 men looking at their hands, at the table, at each other. They began to ask him, one by one, quietly, almost whispering, "Is it I, Lord?" John, who was reclining close to Jesus, so close his head nearly touched Jesus' shoulder, leaned in and asked who it was. And Jesus answered, "It is the one to whom I will give this morsel of bread when I have dipped it." He dipped a piece of bread and handed it to Judas Iscariot, the son of Simon. And the Gospel says that after Judas received it, Satan entered into him. Jesus looked at him and said simply, "What you are going to do, do quickly." Judas got up and went out into the night. And the Gospel of John adds, quietly, almost like a breath, "And it was night." What happened next was the turning point not just of that evening, but of all of human history. Jesus took bread, ordinary barley bread, the kind on every Passover table, and he gave thanks. He broke it. He gave it to them. And he said, "This is my body, which is given for you. Do this in remembrance of me." In the same way, after supper, he took a cup of wine, the third cup of the Passover Seder, the cup of redemption, and he said, "This cup that is poured out for you is the new covenant in my blood." He was reframing the oldest story his people knew. The exodus from Egypt, the lamb whose blood marked the doorposts, the deliverance from death. He was saying, with bread and cup in hand, that all of it had been pointing here. To this room. To this night. To him. The disciples did not fully understand it yet. They were still confused, still frightened, still asking questions. And so Jesus kept talking, pouring out his heart in long, extraordinary sentences, words of comfort and instruction and promise. "Let not your hearts be troubled," he told them. "Believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many rooms. I go to prepare a place for you." He told them the Spirit would come. He told them they were not orphans. He told them the world would hate them and persecute them, and that none of it would be the end. And then he prayed over them, a long, intimate prayer, asking the Father to protect them, to sanctify them, to make them one as he and the Father are one. It was the prayer of a man who loved these people with everything he had and was about to hand them the world. When they had sung a hymn, a Passover hymn, probably the Hallel, the great songs of praise from the Psalms, their voices rising in that lamplit room, they went out to the Mount of Olives. And the night swallowed them. That meal has never really ended. Across 2,000 years, in stone cathedrals and mud-walled churches, in hospital rooms, in prison chapels and kitchen tables on Sunday mornings, people have kept breaking that same bread, pouring that same cup, and hearing those same words. Not because they were instructed to perform a ceremony, but because something in the human heart recognizes the shape of a love that gives itself away completely, that kneels to wash the feet of the ones who will run, that stays at the table even knowing what the night will bring. Jesus knew the storm was coming. He sat down to supper anyway. He broke the bread anyway. He lifted the cup anyway. He said, "Remember me." And the world has never stopped trying to do exactly that.